Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Arcuri, and I will be discussing the arguments for the repeal of the alternative minimum tax. Now that you have seen a brief background information for the alternative minimum tax system, it is time to discuss the reasons for repeal. Repeal of the alternative minimum tax is promoted by several individuals as well as organizations and societies. This list includes the IRS's own taxpayer advocate, members of U.S. Congress, a president-appointed panel, several leaders of the Senate Finance Committee, including ranking members of the AICPA, the American Bar Association Section on Taxation, the Tax Executives Institute, as well as Congress's own Joint Committee on Taxation. For example, one benefit of repeal, according to the American Council for Capital Formation, is that repeal of the alternative minimum tax depreciation adjustment would reduce the cost of capital by about 10%. Lower capital costs induce more investment, faster productivity growth, higher gross domestic product, and increased employment. This can benefit both companies as well as overall society. Other benefits for the repeal of the alternative minimum tax include the elimination of the need to maintain an extra set of books as well as improvements in cash flow. Unlike the regular tax system, features of the alternative minimum tax is not adjusted for inflation. For instance, in 1998, it would have taken an income of $572,934 to provide the same purchasing power as income of $200,000 would have in the year 1976. Also, more and more middle-income taxpayers and lower-income taxpayers are paying taxes that they should not be paying. This is hurting them drastically. Other reasons for repeal is that the repeal of the alternative minimum tax would reduce costs of compliance, since there would be no cost for this tax system. For the alternative minimum tax system currently, it may take taxpayers up to an additional 63 hours to fill out necessary paperwork. Also, for companies, the alternative minimum tax is increasing their tax bills, which inhibits them from creating new jobs or even possibly maintaining their current employee labor force. According to Ranking Finance Committee member Chuck Grassley, the alternative minimum tax is a phony revenue source. Its primary target was the wealthy taxpayers. As I stated before, more and more middle-income and lower-income taxpayers are being affected by this tax system. In addition, the alternative minimum tax is a complete policy failure. According to 1969 Minimum Income Tax Act, its purpose was to collect a minimum amount of tax from wealthy taxpayers. But in the year 2003, approximately 2,300 taxpayers with taxable incomes of at least $200,000 did not pay any income tax. In addition, since 1969, at least 20 bills have been passed to propose changes to the alternative minimum tax. According to these charts, repealing the alternative minimum tax would increase investments as well as real GDP for a substantial number of years. Therefore, according to these arguments as well as many others, the repeal is the only logical choice. What do you think?
Hello, my name is Evgeny Schenfeld. Now that you heard Daniel give his presentation why the AMT needs to be repealed, I will provide you with some information why the AMT needs reform and the types of reform options available. The AMT today is unfortunately not serving its original purpose. The original purpose was to make sure the wealthy paid some tax and to diminish the magnitude of tax sheltering. Unfortunately today, AMT discourages stock ownership and imposes severe financial hardship on those in the middle and lower income tax brackets. According to the latest estimates, as of January 19, 2007, the tax will impact over 23 million taxpayers in 2007 if a temporary patch is not put in place. The debate is whether AMT should be repealed or reformed. A temporary patch for 2007-2008 is available at a cost of $115 billion. It is supported by the leading Senate Democrats. The permanent full repeal is estimated at a cost of $1 trillion over a 10-year period. It is supported by Representative Richard Neal, House Ways and Means Chair Charles Rangel, and the Bush administration. The decision to reform or repeal the AMT depends on a few major factors. 1. The long-term revenue and cost projections of the various reform options versus the full repeal. 2. Number of taxpayers that will be affected by AMT in the various income tax brackets for each reform option. And 3. The number of high-income filers who will owe no tax under each reform option. The temporary solution to AMT is the patch. The advantages are it's cost-effective in the short term and keeps the number of taxpayers affected by AMT at a steady 4 million. The disadvantages are it is inequitable and inefficient. In fact, roughly 25% of the current 2007 patch will benefit those families making over $100,000 in annual income. The long-term reform option is to change the preferences of the deductions allowed under the AMT. Depending on which deductions or credits are allowed under the AMT, this option will reduce the number of AMT taxpayers by nearly 20 million at a cost of $529 billion through 2015. Now, I will discuss two of options proposed by Leonard Berman to reform the AMT. One is to index the AMT, and two is the revenue-neutral retargeting solution. Indexing the AMT may involve additionally removing the middle class exemption preferences and eliminating other major exemption preferences. Revenue-neutral retargeting is a reform option with no effect on the revenue. The great thing about this is it eliminates those AMT taxpayers earning between $50,000 and $75,000 by 99.8%, while keeping the majority of taxpayers in the upper income brackets paying the same amount of AMT tax. As you can see from this chart, the revenue-neutral retargeting is the best option for those taxpayers in all the income tax brackets. Now, the reasons for AMT reform are many. If the AMT is left as it is until 2010, the costs of getting rid of AMT will triple from $40 billion to $112 billion. And the government would be hard-pressed to find a way to generate the lost revenues from AMT. Another reason is the AMT may run as high as $1.2 trillion as its cost through 2015. In comparison, indexing AMT exemption amounts and brackets would only cost the government $376 billion through 2015. And even if the tax cuts are extended, the cost would still be lower at $848 billion. Another reason is, if current tax law is extended beyond its 2010 sunset date, it will cost the Treasury almost as much to repeal the AMT as the regular income tax. In effect, it becomes increasingly cost ineffective for Congress to wait any longer if it wants to repeal the AMT. And another reason is, repeal is regressive. The wealthy stand to benefit the most from it. In fact, more than half the benefits of repeal would go to households earning over $200,000 in 2010. So my conclusion, whether the government chooses to repeal or reform has a major impact on what other policies may be affected in order to balance the federal budget by 2012. Since AMT reform is cheaper than repeal, taxpayers and beneficiaries of entitlement programs will be hurt less by reform than repeal. Those taxpayers in the upper income brackets appear to be the biggest losers if reform is chosen. Those in the middle class stand to gain from either reform or repeal. Finally, Berman and his researchers conclude the ideal solution is for the government to follow the President's Advisory Panel on Federal Income Tax Reform to completely overhaul the income tax, because it will affect a rising majority of baby boomers, and this will be a growing problem if nothing is done. Thank you very much for listening.